As you guys were talking, I was realizing that the CRO role has a lot to do with the move to the cloud, because the cloud enabled SaaS, which made technology companies recurring revenue businesses. So we went from a world of chief sales officer, chief marketing officer, chief customer officer, to one where we had to create one role that oversees everything. And theoretically, that sounds really good. But what we've learned is that it's not easy to find people that are capable of managing all of those functions. And in our slice of the world, you rarely see a CRO who manages all three functions. But I think it's worth highlighting that this dynamic is different based on the stage of the business. So if you look at businesses that are 100 million plus in revenue and ARR, they usually have a president or a president of field operations. That is effectively what we think of the CRO role. That is what that is. Kevin from Clary, who we interviewed a few weeks ago, that is what he is, right?
Yeah.
All of go to market, from pre to post, the CMO to CRO to CC, all report into him. And so that role does exist. It might not be called a CRO, but it comes into play much later. What we've noticed is earlier on the opposite end of the spectrum, if you're a early stage startup, you don't have C-level executives. You have these frontline heads of sales, head of marketing, head of CS reporting into the CEO playing the CRO role. And then usually at the Series B stage, you start bringing in these C-level executives and running these searches. What we've learned is most founders, their comfort is having a CRO who does sales and post sales. They never even think about the marketing component. They're like, marketing is its own different beast. We're not going to give a person who hasn't done marketing. And we also don't want to look at a person coming from marketing who hasn't handled sales and hasn't handled post sales. We don't want to take these risks. We need a person. We can connect the dots between sales and CS. It seems like it overlaps enough for us to say, if a person hasn't handled CS, let's give them CS. We think they can figure it out. There's enough proof of people having done that in the past, but they never want to take the risk of getting somebody to learn on their dime. There's just too much risk there for them.
You know, Asid, on this, to Sam's point about like CMO to CRO, is that because the skill sets that we require and that we value have changed so much more over the last several years? Like, I would say that you hear much, like, marketing has much more of this like customer journey focus that we've seen in PLG, we've seen in just like
PLG
the
is
things we
interesting.
care about, like brand and product marketing. Those things have been valued over a one-to-one sales process where a rep is talking to someone.
Which is why it's stage dependent though, right? Or type of company also comes into play then. So as we're talking through this, it's like, if you're a PLG company, you're going to have a little bit more comfort with the CMO managing all of it than if you're a sales-led growth company.
Right.
Like if you have an enterprise sales cycle and you're Series B, there's no world in which your commercial leader hasn't managed and built a sales org before. It's not just that have them done some sort of sales. They have to have done sales in your environment where you're not selling against status quo, where they've dealt with these deal dynamics, they have stage appropriate experience. Like, you're trying to reduce risk so fundamentally because you don't have many at bats with these roles, right? Like, the reality is, if you're in a category war, if you're really like in a category war, if you misfire on a C-level go-to-market hire, you might give up that category lead and never catch up ever again. You might never catch up ever again. So people are trying their best to reduce risk. And I don't think in a sales-led growth company at that Series A, Series B, Series C stage even, you're going to see people
Let
that
me
are going
push
to give...
on that for a second, Asid. Can you give an example of where that's actually happened? What you've seen? Where a C-level, there was a company that was out in front, they made a bad C-level exec hire, and the company fell wildly behind.
I can't name companies here because that would be really hurting them. But 100%.
Sales talent agency, they made a devastating hire. CRO,
they hired a CEO one time, Sam. I think.
And it just.
I mean, I think
everything
Asid raises a really good point though, which is like, it depends on, it's not just stage dependent, it's motion dependent. Like PLG, I would argue, is a great example where you should probably seriously consider having a marketer in your CRO role, because it is, you know, it is about essentially leaning heavily into inbound, leaning heavily into, like, you want to have a good product leader also to partner with that person. But I think that's a case where marketing could really shine. I think there are CMOs who could also lead enterprise sales organizations. You know, and it was interesting when I raised this in the CMO channel earlier today in Pavilion, I had a really great response from Emma Clayton, who's out of London, who was like, I got to step in and comment on this. And she talked about basically why classically trained marketers are well positioned to do this, because they are essentially trained to deeply understand customers and to develop strategies that are all about like responding to those customers' needs and pain points and situations, right? And so that, and I come from a management consulting background. I also did an MBA in marketing, but like it's a similar to management consulting in that respect, where you're given a problem and you have to figure out how to solve it. And so I think classically trained marketers, her point was, are very well positioned to orchestrate the entire thing. But she also raised a really interesting thing, which was that only 28% of marketing leaders are really like trained in marketing. And I see that all the time. There's people who started out in something else and they went into marketing. And so like, I don't know if that's relevant or not, but I thought that was an interesting point as well, of like, they come from different backgrounds. Are they really trained in that same way to deeply understand the customer and build a strategy around it? Question mark. But the other point she made, which I thought was great, and this is why some marketers, I think, want to tear their hair out when people assume that only somebody with a sales background can become a CRO, which is that often when you put somebody with sales training in that role and they oversee marketing, what you end up with is a very short-term focus, because sales by necessity has to be short-term focused. It's about feeding the beast, right? Like we need more leads, we need more pipeline, and good marketing has to balance short and long-term focus. You have to invest in brand. You have to have that long planning horizon. And so I think this is why so many, like Latney even said, she's like, until I took the CRO job, I used to say over my dead body would I report to a CRO. And it's because I think a lot of marketers feel like their long-term investments all get quashed when they report to somebody who comes from that sales perspective. And that is really detrimental. I mean, it drives up your CAC because you're constantly needing to invest in feeding this short-term, you know, the short-term machine, when really, if you invest for the long-term, you're building a foundation, and your CAC should, over time, in some respects, get more manageable. Sam, I know you think CAC always gets higher, but like, I think the point is CAC would be even higher if you weren't making these investments. It would be disproportionately higher.